On episode 163 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with Pete Magill, who wrote The Born Again Runner. The show notes for this episode can be found at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/163. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Are you ready to get serious about your health and fitness? I'm about to close the doors on Forever Fitness Personal Training to focus on enhancing the membership. When I reopen, I'll be increasing the price. Sign up today to lock in our best annual rate. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/ready and come train with me today. Pete Magill went from being an alcohol and drug-driven chain smoker to a world-class runner. He takes the lessons he learned from his journey and wrote this book, The Born Again Runner, to help new and returning runners. He is also a great storyteller. Enjoy. So Pete, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You know, what I really liked about your book, The Born Again Runner, was that, I found myself at a point in time in my life when my health was not what it needed to be. And I kind of had that wake up moment where, I knew I needed to start figuring things out. And then that kind of led to a journey, that's led me to being fitter at 50 than I was at 32. And you have kind of a similar story.
Yeah, and it's marvelous that you say 50 because I noticed the same thing. My 50th birthday was one of the happiest days of my life because I recognized, hey, I'm fitter than I was in my 30s. I was, unlike a lot of people who are considering taking up a running program, who are kind of struggling with whether they want to do it or whether they don't want to do it, what is the inciting incident that makes them want to do it. I had a pretty straightforward incident. When I was 38 years old and I'd been working in the film business for a while as a screenwriter and working around the clock and, to be perfectly honest, driving my creativity through heavy drinking and drugging. And I was smoking at that time about 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I'd smoked up to 4 packs of cigarettes a day in my 20s when I was a nightclub owner in the Caribbean, but that's another story. But anyway, so I was only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night. I was recently divorced, had my young son about 4 days a week with me, and was really pushing it too hard, was involved in massive substance abuse in order to maintain that hectic lifestyle. And one night at home, I simply collapsed to the floor, unconscious. And later that night in the ER, the doctor told me that no, I hadn't had a heart attack or a stroke or something more serious, but that yes, I was suffering the predictable effects of massive substance use and overwork. And he told me point blank, he'd seen my son waiting for me out in the waiting room. And he said, if you want to see your son graduate from high school, you have to change the way you're living because you will not live to see him graduate with the lifestyle you have now.
That's a kind of a visceral moment. I mean, as I was reading through the book, I was like, that would wake me up straight away.
It did. But also at the time, it would be nice if I could say, well, the next morning, everything changed. But that's not how it happened in life. I woke up the next morning and I still had 30 pages a day due to the producer I was working with. I still had, a lot of the same responsibilities, and I couldn't figure it all out. I knew something had to change, but I couldn't change everything. I had rent to pay, I had obligations, and I also, to be perfectly honest, I knew he'd said that I wouldn't live to see my son graduate, but in the mind of someone who's as overworked as I was like, hey, that gives me about 12 years to play with. Nevertheless, the one thing I knew I could do was something I'd done in the past, hadn't done with any consistency for well over a decade. I had an old pair of Nikes in the closet, and I said, well, I can at least start working a little bit on my health. I'm overweight. I break into a sweat just walking my son to the slides at the playground. I can at least break out my Nikes and go for a little run. And that's where I started, and that's where I did it. And I thought, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do an easy 30 minutes just to break back into the sport. I made it 5 minutes to the first stoplight. The world started to go black in front of me. I broke out into shivers and shakes and thought, oh my goodness, here's that heart attack that our physician said I hadn't had a couple months earlier. And I sat down on the curb and watched the walk, don't walk signs blink back and forth for about 20 minutes until I finally had the strength to get up and walk back to where I'd started the run. And I lay down on the floor. A friend of mine who was an instructor walked in, Charlene. I explained what had happened to her, and I'll never forget her putting her hands on her hips and looking down at me and going, "What'd you expect? You're middle-aged, you're fat, and you smoke." And she stalked out of the room. And I thought, she's right.
That's actually a good friend, That's actually a good friend that'll just tell you like it is.
Oh, yeah. And I just saw her a couple of weeks ago, and we both laughed about the incident. But I went out the next day, and I went out with a different plan because I couldn't afford to fail. And I couldn't just throw running against the wall the way I toss back whiskey shots at night to coax out another 5 pages of screenplay. And I went out and I walked at stoplight and back. And I kept walking. And then within a couple weeks, I was jogging. And it took me 5 months before I finished my first 5-mile run without stopping. And so, it was a case where I couldn't go out and do it the first day, but 5 months later, I could go 5 miles. And that's one of the big messages of the Born Again Runner to anyone who's thinking of taking up a new program. It's an incremental process. Running doesn't always mean running. The first day, it might mean walking. It might be some light resistance training exercises to prepare your legs for walking or for jogging. It's a process that takes time as we transform our bodies from what they are today to what we want them to be in the future.
Well, there's 2 primary reasons that I really love this book, and I want to get into the first one, which is that you use principles. So you've set out 12 principles that are just fairly stated, simple. Just there's something that you can put into your mind and you can practice. And I really like the way they each build on each other. So do you mind going through each of the principles and then just giving us a general description of each of those and how we would apply them?
Absolutely. And let me say, I think the principles are really important. Training schedules change. Your actual training schedule, what you're going to do today, what you're going to do tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, whatever, will change as your body changes. It will change as your age changes. But you have to have guiding principles to both start a program and then to maintain it. So that's why I think principles are really important and why I devote a whole chapter in the book to it. The first principle, which is important, especially for beginning runners, for runners who are first stepping out the door, but also for returning runners. Principle 1, the past is the past. This is something, everyone, it's a cliche. How many people will, New Year's Eve comes, you're going to start a training program. You start it, it doesn't work. Within a month, so many people, or a huge percentage of people have ditched those training programs. We look back at that. We look at it as failures. We wonder if we should start up again, or maybe we did start training and the program didn't produce the results it wants, so we don't want to start. The past is the past. Okay, so it didn't work out last time. So what? Things don't always work out the first time. 2 very famous examples in other sports, of course, the Michael Jordan story, where he went out as a sophomore for the varsity basketball team with his best friend, Leroy Smith, and Leroy made the team and Michael Jordan didn't. He didn't quit. He came back the next year and ended up being arguably the greatest NBA player of all time. Or Steven Spielberg, who applied to the USC film school, the premier film school in the United States, and was turned down not once, not twice, but 3 times. He didn't quit. He went on. He's grossed over $10 billion with the film he's directed. The USC Film School has now named the building after him, given him an honorary degree. Okay, it doesn't mean we're going to end up being Michael Jordan but they're good examples of whatever happened in the past or whatever obstacle prevented you from achieving something in the past doesn't mean you can't achieve it in the future. And here I kind of paraphrase of all people, dear Abby, from a column I read of hers a long time ago. She was talking about like finding your perfect relationship. But she said, we all fail until we do this, we succeed. And that's how you have to look at your new program. Principle 2, walk before you run. Once again, this is a cliche, but it also happens to be entirely true. New runners and runners coming back often start their programs with a misconception. They body is this single running unit, and if you throw a run at it, somehow, I call it the trickle-down theory of training. Somehow all that great stimulus from the first run will trickle down and make your whole body better. A lot of times they go out for, say, like I wanted to do 30 minutes the first day, and you come back the next day and you're a little bit sore, but you think, okay, I can still run, and it actually feels kind of good. And about a week later, your muscles are feeling pretty good, and so you up the miles a little bit, or you up the intensity. And along about 3 weeks to 2 months, suddenly you're out training, and boom, your knee hurts, or your hip hurts, or you've got shin splints. If high school coaches had $1 for every time one of their new athletes complained about shin splints, they wouldn't have to be high school coaches anymore. And what people don't realize is your body isn't one system. It's a lot of systems working together, and some of them adapt at different rates. You've got just 3 right off the bat: your nervous system, your muscular system, your connective tissue system. And connective tissue is just another word for your tendons, your bones, your ligaments. So you go out that first day and you trash your muscles a little bit, and the next day you're a little sore, but you can run again. And you think, well, that was okay. Well, what really happened is your nervous system adapted more quickly than your muscles. So the next day you go out, and even though you're a little sore, you can still run kind of good again. And you think, well, my muscles must be okay. But what really happened is your nervous system adapted and you're more efficient. So you keep running, and about a week later, your muscles sort of finally catch up and they don't feel so bad. And so you keep running again. But here's the thing. Almost all gains in strength and in fitness first month of running come from nervous system adaptations. And so while you're pushing, while you're increasing the volume, while you're throwing these hard workouts at your body, your nervous system and your muscles are adapting, and your connective tissue is way behind. And right about 3 weeks to 2 months, suddenly you put on too great a stress for your Achilles tendon, or for tendons that run along or the side of your shins, or for your hip or your knee, and boom, you have that injury. Okay, so you've got to take time. I start every program walking and then walk jogging. And if you take your time, if you take it slow, if you walk before you run, you're going to have a lot better chance of making it to the next stage of your program a couple months in without an injury. Principle 3, keep it simple. Okay, this is a simple principle. To start your new program, you don't need it to be your birthday. You don't need it to be New Year's Eve. You don't need the theme from Rocky playing in the earbuds over your earphone. You don't need a sunset. You don't need the beach. You don't need a mountain trail. All you need is a simple circular course. A track is perfect around your block, someplace that's relatively flat, where you won't get very far from the start position so that you can always be near the finish position. And then you need to put on your shoes and just go. Keep it simple. The best time to start your run is not on a significant holiday. It's now. That kind of goes in hand with principle 4, shirt, shorts, shoes. Too many people think that as part of the motivation for starting a running program, you need to go out and really commit yourself to the program. usually with a lot of expensive purchases. A couple of years back, I had a good friend call me on the phone and say, "Hey, Pete, I need a new running program. I just went out today. I got a new Gore-Tex warm-up suit. I got a GPS monitor. I got a heart rate monitor. I've got 3 pairs of training shoes. I got a couple pair of race flats. I got 3 different outfits. All I need is the training program now." And I said, okay, I'll do the training program. And a couple of days later, I haven't heard from him. About a week later, I still haven't heard from him. I run into him a couple of weeks later and I say, "Tom, I've got that training program. What happened?" He said, he goes, after doing all that shopping, I was just burned out on running.
Yeah, I had a woman ask me the other day, she wanted to start biking because she saw that as a way for her to get cardiovascular fitness without a lot of pressure on her knees. And I'm like, that's great. She says, "So what bike should I get?" And I'm like, probably the cheapest one you can find, just to make sure you like biking first. Because if you buy an expensive bike and then you don't ever use it, then you just wasted all that money. Go just buy any bike or borrow a bike, or, just go to the Goodwill and buy a bike. I said, just anything that you can get out on the road and see and let your body start adapting. And I said, then once you start understanding your biking style and what you want to do, whether you want to do off-road, on-road, mountain biking or whatever, then you know what kind of bike to get. Get the bug first and then make the investment.
Right. And, I write about running, but one of the things I say in this book, I say, look, if running isn't your bag, find some other fitness outlet. Find biking, get yourself an elliptical, go hiking, do something. But that's another reason not to spend, like you say, a lot of money out the door. In this case, you don't need a GPS for your first day because you should probably be walking or jogging anyway. You don't need to know what your pace per mile and exactly how far that walk or that walk jog was. All you need is a pair of shoes, shorts, and a shirt. 2 of each if you want to go nuts. And again, there's plenty of time to pick up the rest of it along the way. I'm being the Imelda Marcos of running shoes. If you look, I've got, I alternate between 3 different pair of training shoes from day to day. I've got a pair of racing flats that I use to run tempo in, a different pair for repetitions, and a different pair to actually race in. I've got spikes for cross country. I've got spikes for training on the track. I've got spikes for racing cross country, spikes for racing on the track. But I took my time getting it. When I needed it, I got it. And guess what? It's always there. The running store is open 7 days a week, and I can get the equipment as I need it. So principle 5, and this is an important one. It's train with the body you have. Runners come in all shapes and sizes, but you don't. You come in your own shape, your own size, your own gender, your own age, your own fitness background. What works for the winner of the Boston Marathon as training will not necessarily work for you. You look at the perfect ectomorph running body sported by those marathon champions. You watch them out running on the street. It's like watching leaves being blown along by a 50-mile-per-hour wind. They scoop freely down the road in a way that the vast majority of us simply don't. So your best training program is the program that works for you. And different options for how to start that. You'll probably need, I put a lot of different training programs in the book. I put more online on bornagainrunner.com. It's a companion website to the book, which exists solely for the purpose of presenting downloadable training schedules, pace charts, and other things that will help you on your running journey. When you're trying to pick a training schedule, like I say, there isn't one for everybody. I explain it like this. Let's say I'm in Los Angeles right now, or in the Los Angeles area. If I wanted to travel from where I sit right now to where I'd want to be, New York, I couldn't call up a friend in Miami who'd just taken the trip last week and ask them their driving directions, how they made it, because I'm not driving from Miami. And when we're driving, or when we're traveling our fitness journey from where we are to that distant land of fitness, we can't use somebody else's directions if they're not starting from the same place we are. So again, you need to plot your training based on what works for you and your body. Dr. George Sheehan, the famed philosopher, writer of our sport, wrote, "We are all an experiment of one." And it's true. You're an experiment of one, and you have to find what works for you. Principle 6 is really important. Principle 6 is, it's the recovery, stupid. Runners are sometimes really surprised to learn that we don't get fit while we're exercising. We only get fit when we're recovering from the exercise we've done. The training itself is a stimulus that damages muscle fibers. That's a fancy word for muscle cells. Damages connective tissue, that drains the carbohydrate stores in our muscles, that affects our neurotransmitters and our hormones. Basically, it takes our body and beats it up. When we recover, that's when our body repairs that damage and it refuels the stock supplies and it puts our bodies back into homeostasis. But more than that, it does this remarkable thing. The body looks at what we've done and it says, well, that guy was that was kind of dumb. He really put a heavy burden on us. We better make ourselves a little bit stronger next time. So it overcompensates and it actually rebuilds us stronger than we were before. You know, we're versions of the $6 Million Man, if you remember that old series. And training makes us stronger than we were before. But it only does that if we allow it the process of recovery. That means, 24 to 48 normal workouts, up to 72 hours after harder ones. For those of us, I'm 55 now. For someone my age, it might be 4 or 5 days after a hard workout before I can even think about doing a hard workout again. Without that recovery, you won't get that overcompensation. You won't get even a return to where you were before the workout. There's a hugely damaging cliche in our sport, no pain, no gain. And as a coach for 30 years and a competitor for many years, I will tell you that no pain, no gain generally only results in you getting one thing, and that's pain. Always remember, it's not the training you do that counts, it's the training from which you can recover. Principle 7, the only opinion that matters is your own. If you're just starting out in a program, if there's some reason, like let's say you're overweight or you just have never been an athlete and you're a little bit embarrassed about getting on the road, you're embarrassed about putting on one of those tight running outfits or baring your legs or doing whatever it is when you get out, you have to let that fear go. I tell the story of a girlfriend of mine from back in my early 20s. And I convinced her she had had some serious things go wrong in her life and she'd let her weight get completely out of control. She wanted to get back in shape. And I convinced her to go out and start an easy jogging program. And she went out, she went down to the local Rose Bowl loop, which is a 3-mile loop around Southern California's Rose Bowl. She started her running and she got no more than about 100 yards into it before some jerk pulled up next to her in his car, rolled down his window and yelled at her, "Give it up, it's too late for you," and drove off laughing. She came home in tears that night. She didn't want to go out again. She was embarrassed. She was humiliated. She didn't believe that she was going to be successful anyway. And I convinced her to set that aside, to just like if you got a mild calf cramp when you were out running, you stretch it out, you shake it off, you move on. It's funny because she came to a book event I did for this very book just a couple weeks ago up in Sacramento. And she sat in the back. I didn't know she was going to be there. And she sat in the back of the audience. And, I haven't seen her for a while. And I'll be darned, she didn't give up after that day. She kept running. She raised 2 great kids who were athletes in high school. Here we are almost 35 years later, and she is still fit, still working out. She looks fantastic. And somewhere out there, that jerk who yelled at her 35 years ago is undoubtedly still a jerk. So, like I say, the only opinion that matters, doesn't matter what somebody else says. It only matters where you're going and what you're thinking of yourself while you're doing it. Principle 8, no rain checks unless it's raining. Okay, there are going to be days that we don't want to run and we can't run. Maybe we're injured, maybe there's a commitment, and I mean like a wedding, not a TV show. Maybe we are excessively fatigued. Maybe there's extreme weather and, 120 degrees in humidity or minus 20 degrees and 50 mile per hour winds, not it's a little hot out or a little balmy. Sure, don't run on those days. But on the other days, when you just don't feel like running, when it's been a long day, when your running partner can't make it, when maybe a pizza or a chocolate fudge brownie sundae sounds better than an hour on the roads, on those days, you still need to get it out. Get out there and run. Not every day is going to be Zen bliss, especially after the first years of running. There are days when you just have to make it in a habit. And the reason I say that is because it's easy to get into a habit of missing days and of excusing days, of saying, well, the job, well, this. But here's the problem. There are fitness gains you get from training that you lose so quickly. Now, sure, a lot of the fitness gains we get will persevere if we take time off. But other fitness gains, things like gains in our ability to produce aerobic power, okay, we can lose, if you're a relatively new runner, up to half of your new gains with a week off, and you just don't want to lose what could be months of gains by taking that week off, because that's only going to discourage you. It's going to make it harder to go forward. I like to bring up the example of Ron Hill, who was a 3-time Olympian and the 1970 Boston Marathon champion. Ron Hill ran 50 years straight without missing a day. That's 18,263 days, 134,531 miles. Once, after a car crash in which he broke his collarbone, he went out for a run. Another time, after bunion surgery, when he couldn't run on one foot, ended up taking a crutch and hopping a 27-minute mile just to keep the streak alive. Now, my point is not that we have to be like Ron Hill and go hop a mile on a crutch. But I do think that we can admit that if Ron Hill could hop a mile on a crutch in 27 minutes, we can go out for a run after a long day of work, or even, if it is in fact raining. Having lived in the Pacific Northwest for a couple of years, I can guarantee you, if you didn't go out when it was raining, you would not run.
Yeah, it's kind of like down here in the South. If you're not going to deal with a little bit of heat, then there's an entire 6 months of the year that you're not going to want to get out and run. So, getting that habit, like you said, and saying, okay, I'm going to run, 3 days per week, and maybe right now I've built up to a point where I'm doing a mile per run. If that's where I'm at, I want to do those 3 miles. Today's not a good day. What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Oh, well, tomorrow's going to be just as bad. Maybe I need to go to the gym and just do this treadmill workout this time. And that's not my norm. It's not what I'll enjoy, but I get my mile done and I have the satisfaction that I'm not losing the gains, and I'm kind of keeping my body in this set of, this is what we do. This is just who we are. We are runners. And so therefore we have to run.
Absolutely. And one of the chapters, and I won't go into it in depth here because I want to get through these principles, but is one of the chapters in the book talks about creating an action plan, even if you don't write it out, thinking it out in your head. And one of the things is, if it's too hot to run, what am I going to do? If it's too cold to run, know ahead of time, I'm going to go to the gym and get on that treadmill. I'm going to ride the stationary bike in front of my television. Whatever your plan is, have a plan. Know that if the day throws up an obstacle, it's not the end of the plan to get out there. Anyway, principle 9, dieting can wait and so can everything else. This is important because a lot of runners, or a lot of potential runners, start up for the express purpose of losing weight. The only problem is that your body, when you try to do two, it makes it much harder to achieve success in any of them. You've already decided you're going to go and start a physical fitness program. Okay, two things. A, you need calories to run, not only to get out there and do the run itself, but for your body to repair afterwards. You're going to need to replace things like lost carbohydrate fuel within your muscle fibers because your body needs to use that to go out the next. Don't replace those calories. If you don't replace those energy sources, this is what happens. The next day, your legs feel flat. They feel dead, okay? And working. I thought I was going to feel better. I got to take a day off. So you take days off until your legs feel better, and then you've lost the fitness boost that you were trying to get. The American Psychological Association, and I keep this written right here because I talk about this so much, they write that replacing unhealthy behaviors with healthy ones requires time. To improve your success, focus on one goal at a time. And that's what I say. Spend 2 to 3 weeks, even 4 weeks, getting that fitness program going first. Not only will you then be capable of working out a little bit more, of a little bit more, and of teaching your body to be more efficient at storing the fuel sources it needs, but you'll be burning more calories. It will be easier to do the diet. It will be easier to take on a new task then. When I first put on those running shoes and started running again, that's all I could handle that day. But let me just talk about, just quickly, one of the things in my life I dealt with. I found that if I didn't smoke cigarettes before I went out for a run, lo and behold, the run was a lot easier. And so I cut down cigarettes before I went out. And then I found that if I didn't smoke cigarettes after the run, I actually felt a lot better after the run. And given that I wasn't a crazy person smoking cigarettes during the run, I found that I was able to give up smoking. Now, I'm all for cold turkey. That's how it happens. But what I'm saying is if I had spent that first day and I'd said, I'm going to start running, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to quit drinking, I'm going to quit drugging, I'm going to quit this job, I'm going to do all of it, I would have guaranteed failure in every single one of those things. Because I tackled them one at a time, I successfully achieved the result I was after. Principle 10, slower is faster. This relates back to walk before you run. Okay, as long as you walked before you ran, as long as you went out and you took the first steps slower instead of beating down your connective tissue by overwhelming it based on feedback you were getting from your muscles and your nervous system, as long as you took your time, you will build a very strong foundation on which you can then put more training, increased training, where you can bring in the diet without threatening your fitness program. I always like talking about we all know the story. The hare challenges the tortoise to a race. The hare takes off way too fast. The hare gets overconfident, stops, takes a nap. The tortoise comes along, passes him. By the time the hare has realized what's going on, he can't get to the finish line before the tortoise, and the tortoise wins the race. As I also like mentioning, we all know that the story is kind of a crock. We knew it when we were kids. We knew the hare would have won the race. But regardless of that, it's a remarkably apt analogy for running. If you go out and you go out slowly and you build slowly, if you have confidence, if you think not 2 weeks down the line, not 2 months down the line, not even 6 months down the line, although that's a good place. Most of us, if we can think 6 months, that's good. I tend to think, I make my plans a year in advance or 2 years where I'm going. If we can think long term, then the time we spend building a foundation, much. And then once we've built that foundation, all those things we really want to have happen, the lost weight, the increase in our fitness, we can start doing the work and taking on the diet and taking on the habits we want to get rid of. And we can achieve all of that. What I always tell people is that, the moral of this story is that the fastest way to become a better runner is to take your time. Slower gets you there faster. Seldom gets you there at all. It gets you back on the couch, back with an injury, back thinking about when you're going to make your next attempt at a fitness program. Principle 11, and this is one that people sometimes forget. It's got to be fun. Look, if you don't enjoy your fitness program, if you don't enjoy your running, you will stop doing it. It might seem courageous to go out and run till muscles are burning and your vision is blurring and your brain is screaming to stop for a few times, but that gets old very quickly. If you want to continue, you need to pick workouts that are manageable and that lead to improvement and that you can sustain. Another thing I really tell people is you've got to create a support team. Don't do this in secret. Don't start your fitness program. Be like Batman, doing great deeds while hiding behind a mask. Let family and friends who you can trust to support you know that you're starting this program. So that after the first few weeks, when the Zen bliss starts to wane, and when the excitement of starting the program also begins to wane, that you have people who can step in and remind you, how much they respect you for what you're doing, and can give you the pat on the back you need, and who you can just talk to. It's amazing how just talking about your program helps to keep you involved in your program. And along those lines, it's a great idea to join the running community. And I don't mean you have to go off and join your local competitive running club, but find a friend to train with, or a group. Or, if you don't have someone you can train with, go online, go to a Runner's World Beginners Forum, runningahead.com to one of their beginners forums, and interact with other people who are also starting a program and have the questions you do, and are facing the same issues you do about moving your program forward and making it work with your life. Also, schedule rewards. I ran an 8K cross-country race yesterday. Okay, I trained hard to run that 8K cross-country race. I maintained a good diet to stay at a good race weight. I did lots of training specific to the race. After the race, I went out and I had a big breakfast, bigger than I would normally have, perhaps a little less healthy than a breakfast I might normally have. I get to have things like waffles and syrup after a big race. Okay, I schedule rewards for big events, You can schedule rewards just for having a good week. You can have that dessert you're not having normally. Or, take yourself out to a movie. Do something to reward yourself for success in your program. Finally, make variety the spice of your running life. Don't limit your workouts to the same workout every day. All distance running makes distance running a very boring sport. Do some intervals, do some drills, once you can do it. Cross train. Get out on your bicycle, or go for a spin on an elliptigo, which is an elliptical bicycle, or get on the treadmill, or on the elliptical machine at your gym, or go for a hike. Do something. Keep your fitness program fun. If it's fun, you'll keep doing it. Your running program should not be an obligation. It should be a highlight of every day.
Yeah, I know when I was training for my first marathon, I had a lot of variety in my training, because I had recognized from when I was running when I was younger that my joints and ligaments, they just weren't going to be able to handle the repeated stress of running all the time to train for a marathon. Realize I'm Clydesdale size. So a marathon's a pretty big beat on my body. And so I knew if I could just keep my body moving for 3 to 4 hours, then the running would not be the problem. It's just going to be mental at that point. So I did my training in kind of like you said, that cross training type situation, keeping the cardiovascular, continuing to build strength, kind of looking at it from, different muscle groups and the way I was using them. And then what really surprised me when I did the marathon, because when I was running shorter races, I was a little bit more competitive, in the towards the front of the pack, running a little bit harder. But in marathons, they were very social. It was like I'm having this great conversation with these Navy guys that they're submariners. Finally, they started upping the pace a little bit, and I said, okay, well, you guys are leaving my pace range, so I'll see you later. Dropped back, was talking to this other gentleman. for a while, and then some lady that towards the end, and it was just really kind of surprising. Again, everybody's just talking, and you're meeting these great people. It really, again, it was just, I was kind of floored at how social running was, because I, up till that point, had not experienced the social aspects of it. And so I think that's one of the things about, when you do plan your 5K, having people that are going to run with you. If you're going to do longer runs, then there's just a natural grouping of people. You hang out and you just sit there and talk to kind of pass the time, but you'll meet people from all over the world a lot of times, and maybe even someone from just around the corner that you didn't know. Then you now have a running buddy that can keep you even more engaged going forward.
Absolutely. And you nailed it. There's nothing quite like a marathon or really a half marathon for the community feel of running, because you have to slow down your pace enough to a point where you can talk. You can't do that in a 5K. You should, you try to talk to me in a 5K and I'm going to give you a dirty look.
You're so far ahead of me in this 5K, you wouldn't hear me.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. And here's the other thing I love about running is that, I'm obviously pretty fast, for my age anyway. And the thing I love is I can talk when I finish a race. I can talk with anybody who ran that race, and we had the same experience. We ran up the same hill. We felt the same way, with a mile to go. We saw the same sights. We had the same things going through our head. It's this is especially true when you get into things like cross-country races, where you talk about this patch of mud you ran through or whatever. Even if it's a race where you can't talk during the race, after the race, you can sit around and talk with anybody else who ran the race, and you all have the same experience. I think it's wonderful that way. It's a tremendous community. Principle 12 is the most important principle of all of them. Without this principle, none of the rest of them matter. And it's something that I always, on the very first time I talk to new runners I'm coaching, or to, new members of my club, it's always the first thing I impress upon them. Principle 12, know you'll succeed. Now, I'm not talking about a mind over matter thing. It's not like you can think your way to a sub 4-minute mile, or to finishing a marathon in a good time without training or anything like that. What I mean by know you'll succeed is know that your program is going to lead to success. Know that where you're standing today is the starting line for a journey that is going to take you to success in your training program. And so important is that until you absolutely can see the finish line and know you're going to arrive there, you won't do the things it takes to be successful. And when you know you're going to hit that finish line, you become willing to do those things. You become willing to train at the correct effort level every day. You aren't out there trying to prove something to yourself or to anybody else. You're willing to include injury prevention exercises, because you don't say, I just don't have 10 minutes for those twice a week or 3 times a week, because if you don't do them, it will curtail your ability to reach that finish line. You know that you're going to reach that finish line, and that means you have to avoid injury. So you do them. You schedule recovery days and you stick to them, because you expect to improve. You expect to change your body from what it is today to what you want it to be. And recovery is a part of that. You don't skip workouts. Workouts are your tools to arrive at that finish line. They are what are going to remold your body for you. You eat a healthy diet because you need the energy and the nutrition to reach your goals. You do take on a healthy diet and a healthy amount of food because you need the fittest body you can produce in order to get there. You resist impulsive mid-work, like somebody your age, your gender, looks about your ability, comes up beside you when you're on a distance run, glances at you with kind of a snarl, on their lips, and takes off ahead of you, you don't think, oh, I'm going to go run that guy down and teach him a lesson. I was out running that Rose Bowl loop I referenced earlier one day, and a guy came up on me and he passed me. And I'm like, okay, forget it. Just let him go. Well, then he slowed down. I came up and I'm like, So I edged past him again. He didn't like that. So he passed me again. And then he turned around and he ran backwards right in front of me, just to show how much he was able to kick my rear. And I got to tell you, he was my age. He was, obviously thinking that we were competitive, and I wanted with every, fiber of my body to go run him down. And I said, no, that's not part of my fitness journey. He is not part of my fitness journey. He turned around, he ran off, more power to him. I hope he's still out there running someplace. Here's the thing. 2 weeks later, I went out and I ran a 14:34 5K on the track at age 46 and set the American record for the distance. I would not have been able to run that if I had taken this guy on mid-workout.
So yeah, those are great. And like I said, that was only one reason I really love this book. I think the other reason that I know I like this book is kind of just your view on injury with an emphasis on prevention. And so you have all of these preventative exercises in the book to address specific issues, because in running, there's going to be some aches and pains occasionally. Recognizing what those are and then doing the right thing so it doesn't become a chronic problem is really what it's all about. And so again, I appreciate this, because now this book is not only a great read, it also is a reference that you can pull down and keep going back to time and time again.
Yeah, and that's very important. And let me finish up Principle 12, and then I really want to say something about the injury prevention too, because I think your listeners will be very interested in the way we approach it. But I just wanted to say about knowing you'll succeed. The final thing is that when you do all these things, you begin to plan long term. You see your fitness goal, you plan long term. You stop caring about how long it's going to take you to get to that success, and you start thinking about the success itself and what you're going to achieve. I like to say that you're like a painter. A painter doesn't daub his paintbrush in yellow, make a streak on a canvas and go, what should I paint now? He sees or she sees the painting in their mind, and then they paint it. I tell the runners that are starting out and we're putting together a program, I tell them, you're Michelangelo using his chisel to free David from a block of Carrara marble. You are the creator, using workouts, using diet, using all of this to create the runner you want to be and achieve the goal you want to achieve. And I just want to point out at this point, going started about, me being in that ER and that doctor, telling me I wouldn't live to see my son graduate from high school. I want to say that on a warm June evening in 2012, I sat in the South Pasadena high school stands. I was fit, I was healthy, and I was thinking back on, a decade of wonderful times spent with my son, and I watched him get his diploma. And that, for me, was the greatest running accomplishment of my life. And when I started running at age 39, that was the running goal I saw, and that was the goal I wanted to achieve. And I knew I had to do it, and I knew I needed to be successful, and I did the things that it took to get there. So I just wanted to finish out how Principle 12 was personally so important to me. And now, as far as injury prevention, which is personally important to everybody out there who's ever suffered through the pain of Achilles pain, of IT band syndrome, of plantar fasciitis, of runner's knee, of generalized hip pain, or a stress fracture, or tendonitis of any kind, or lower back tightness, or sciatica. The thing I wanted to do in this book is I wanted to tell you specifically things you could do for what ails you. So I took each injury and gave a couple exercises that you can actively put into your routine that will help prevent the injury, that will help you in your recovery from the injury, and that represent the latest views not only on how to treat it, but also my experience in runners using exercises to treat injuries. Too much injury prevention. You go online and you find a billion suggestions for every injury. A lot of them have been around for 30, 40 years. A lot of them haven't been working for 30 or 40 years. I know this personally because I've had almost every one of these injuries. And when you suffer through these injuries for a month or 6 months, or in the case of plantar fasciitis, I had that for 3.5 years. Achilles bursitis, I had for 6 years. It becomes very important that what you do actually address the injury and then actually lead to a resolution of the injury. So that is possibly the thing I'm proudest about in the book, is exercises you can easily put into your will help you with what ails you.
No, but what's really good about it is the way it's laid out. So literally there's a table and it tells you the page number to flip to. There's beautiful pictures to kind of demonstrate the exercises. So again, just really a great reference resource. I really appreciate this.
Oh, well, I'm hoping that a lot of people with problems appreciate it too. Like I said, we can talk about all the rest of it and all the rest of it, but all you need is to, runners, especially after you've been with it for a while, your day goes, you go for your run and your day can be sunny and it's such a positive experience. You finish a run feeling great, and then your Achilles suddenly hurts and you're depressed. You go straight into you just dive straight into oh, woe is me, what am I going to do? Because that running becomes such an important part of your life. And so I wanted to help people climb out of that.
Awesome. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, if they need to get in touch with me, they can always go to my website, PeteMagill.com, and there's ways to contact me there. Everything I know almost is in my 2 books. So if you want to interact with me, you can find Build Your Running Body or this new book, The Born Again Runner. And The Born Again Runner targets new and returning runners. So if you're a new or returning runner, start with The Born Again Runner. Build Your Running Body is a little bit more sciencey, a little bit more advanced, though it's certainly written so that anybody can understand what the science we discuss and the training we discuss. And those books are available in your local bookstore, whether that's Barnes & Noble or an independent bookstore, available everywhere online too.
Okay. Well, this is going to be episode 163. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/163, and I'll have all those links listed there. So Pete, again, thank you so much for your time. This has been an excellent conversation.
Well, it's been great for me too. Part of my sticking with this sport and getting what I can out of this sport is passing on the word to everybody else. That this is a sport that can not only incrementally take you toward your fitness goals, but can incrementally lead to change in your overall life.
Yeah, thank you. I do hope you'll join me at Forever Fitness Personal Training. If you're tired of losing ground, I can help. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/ready. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Elle Russ and discuss her book, The Paleothyroid Solution. I know you or someone you know deals with thyroid issues. This one's for you. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.